Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a video and podcast show that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful people from around the world. Today, it is my privilege to welcome Kapil Mehta. Kapil, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Kapil is from IIT Delhi. He's from IIM Ahmedabad. He is now the co-founder of Secure Now, which is an insurance broking firm. But he has worked for DLF Pramerica, Max New York Life, and in his earlier avatar also was with McKinsey and Unilever. So Kapil, tell me a little bit about your early work.
Well, after I graduated from IIM Ahmedabad, the first job which I had was with Hindustan Lever. And that was really a fabulous job because it was my transition from the theoretical, intellectual college life into the real world. And I was in sales and marketing. I looked after these very prestigious brands, Lux Soap.
Yeah.
But I also traveled all across the country in my sales stint. Mm-hmm. I then left them to join McKinsey, as you pointed out, which was a diametrically opposite world. So, you know what Levers taught me in terms of working with people, getting things together. McKinsey was sort of about being intellectually honest, speaking out your mind, and working with very senior people. So that was a fabulous several years I spent, and then I joined Max New York Life, which was a startup. So in many sense, an opposite of what Hindustan Lever was. And this whole thing came together when I set up Prudential's business in India, DLF Pramerica business.
Right.
Yes, that was how it was. I think the experiences have been so diverse and so varied, but each one has been fascinating.
So tell me, before I come into the insurance part, what would you say are three key milestones in your career?
I think that's a lovely question. In Hindustan Lever, there was one soap that I was supposed to relaunch, which was called a Pond's Dream Flower soap. Mm-hmm. And I messed that up substantially because I got something wrong with the technical specifications. And when I look back, I think I learned a lot from that particular aspect. Similarly, when I was at McKinsey in one of my first studies, I spent a lot of time trying to coach individuals. Whereas what I ought to have done was to have actually, taken a quick decision on the person and moved on. And of course, the biggest milestone is when I set up my own company, Secure Now, because that was something which I'd been wanting to do for so long. Terrific. And then I set out on my own, with my own thing, with all its highs and lows. Mm-hmm. I think that has been really, by far, the biggest milestone.
Terrific. So that's a great segue into the next question. And let's move to Secure Now. What is the role of a broker in insurance?
There are two different entities through which insurance is sold. There are agents who represent the insurer, and then there are brokers like us who represent the client. So we are a very important part of the market because we are insurer neutral and we can give advice which is truly in the interest of the clients. This fact is not well recognized, and that's really the capability we're trying to build. Mm-hmm. Our focus in Secure Now is mostly on commercial insurances. So we work with small companies rather than individuals, but we really sort of represent our customers. That's the proposition.
Correct. And insurance, the way I remember it, and I'm much older, from a different vintage, but insurance has been growing very slowly, and it was traditionally either the four major insurance companies, and most parents took a 25,000 rupee life insurance as a means of saving. Today, not only are they private sector insurance companies, but insurance is much, much more accepted. Yet I'm told that the percentage coverage is still low. So my question to you is, how has insurance started to change over the years?
But before I answer that question, I wanted to comment on your point about vintage, because I think after everybody crosses 40, we are all the same vintage. So in today's day and age, we are all sort of in the same boat.
I'm 63, so sure. People keep telling me 63 is yesterday's 40, but I say chronologically I'm 63. I may feel different.
Insurance has changed. The number of people who have insurance is actually minimal. On the individual side, it's probably not more than 25-30% of the people who ought to be insured are insured, and even they are covered for very low amounts. And partly the problem is what you just mentioned, that people have bought insurance for investment. There's no investment also really worth the name because the returns are very poor. So they really are not insured. And then when you look at the corporate side of the business, particularly the small and medium enterprises who run into 40, 50 million, none of them are insured. 60% of our clients are buying insurance for the first time as companies. So I think, from an insurance standpoint, India is one of those last few milestones where the under-penetration is so severe and the market and the needs are so large that they have to be met. And you can't do it by traditional ways of, having a cup of tea with a person. You have to bring technology and think of interesting ways to do it. So I think we have a long way to go.
Right. And from your and my conversation will be heard by thousands of people. Some will be very aware of insurance, some are not aware of insurance. So my next question is that what are the basic segments of insurance that every common person must know about?
Yeah. I think that's a great question. And before I sort of answer that, maybe I thought I'll just give you a little analogy. Like if I look at the past few years, there have been some natural disasters in India, like the Uttarakhand floods, there have been the Chennai floods. These, in terms of damage, are equivalent to, let's say, the hurricanes in Florida, in the US, in terms of absolute amount. But the insured amounts here run into just a couple of $1 million, insignificant in the whole scheme of things. Whereas in the US and other markets, insurance levels are much higher. So I think as individuals, everybody should think about their life, obviously. If something happens to them, how's the family going to survive, which is term insurance that we're talking about. Health is, I think in today's pandemic times, health has become the most important. We just realize the importance of health. It's always been important. You need to make sure that you have enough money to take care of expenses for the future from a health insurance standpoint. If you own assets like a home, you absolutely have to insure those. And the same thing actually, Ashutosh, translates into the commercial companies' standpoint, because they also have to protect their assets. They also have to take care of the health of the employees through group health insurances. And in the case of companies, you also have the additional issues of liability, somebody litigating against you and so on. So there are a group of these 8 or 10 insurances which you need to have complete your portfolio. And once you've done that, you can forget about the risk part of it, because at least that is taken care of by insurance.
So what you're saying is for an individual, life is one, protection of your home or your asset is second, and health is the third.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And how many people are really covered in terms of percentage for life or for health?
For health insurance, actually, it's become a large number now because of the various government schemes like Ayushman Bharat. So they're probably about 50% of the population. You're talking 500-600 million people who are covered. In terms of life insurance, the numbers are much smaller. So in fact, Swiss Re publishes something which is called the protection gap, and which says that how much of death cover should you have and how much do you actually have. And India is the largest in terms of under insurance on a per person basis in across the world actually. The average, just to give you another statistic, the average life cover for a person will be about 1.5 to 2 lakh of rupees, which means that if a person dies, they're going to, of the people who are insured, I'm not talking of the uninsured. Now, what is 1.5 to 2 lakhs if a person dies? It's nothing.
I agree. So my next question to you is that, insurance was always seen as a means to save and get a tax benefit.
Yeah.
Under section, I think 80C or whatever. This has changed. Is it because Indians have started to understand risk more, or something else has happened?
I think, if I may just tell a little sort of side story on that, I think how people view that, the perspective on that depends upon which position you are in. So, when I was a managing director for a life insurance company, since most of what you sell tend to be savings instruments, I often thought that there is a merit in the savings instrument because people are getting savings, which otherwise they would just sort of keep at home and not earn anything on.
Yeah.
But, as I've sort of thought about it over the past several years, I realized that the most important thing is actually protection, which is pure term cover. The savings aspect, there are so many different ways you can save money. Small government schemes, provident fund, PPF, insurance is one of those options, mutual funds. And the awareness on that is still very low. So while in the English newspapers that all of us read, we talk about protection very often. I write about it all the time. On the ground, if you look at what's actually selling, it's still largely the savings and the investment oriented products. And that's why it puts a lot of pressure on us who are in the ecosystem to make sure that those products are also sensible for people who buy them. and have a reasonable amount of protection in them. So, it's a way of they're buying something and you add on what they really need very severely onto the main product, even if they don't ask for it.
Okay. So, let's talk a little bit now about, Ayushman Bharat. You spoke about that. When it was announced, we were talking of half a billion people being covered. For our listeners and viewers, help us understand this whole scheme.
The scheme is essentially that if you're under a certain category, let's say below poverty line, or you're underprivileged in some way, then you're eligible for this insurance, which is a substantial amount. It's up to 5 lakh of rupees. You can walk into any of the hospitals which are empaneled, which is a very large number of hospitals, and get treated. And there's no paperwork, because you just use if you have an Aadhaar card or Aadhaar number, you just go do your sort of biometric verification and you're treated. And there are very strict conditions around what gets covered. Basically, everything gets covered by and large. Now, I think this is fabulous, because until the Ayushman Bharat was announced, it was only people who had private their own health insurances, who got these kind of covers. Now suddenly the mass population has this, and so in a sense it's putting a lot of pressure on the industry to say what is the baseline for the quality of insurance that you need to give. And because the scale has increased so much, there are so many initiatives taking place in the health insurance industry now to actually improve the status. So, for example, there is the National Health Mission, which was announced. There's an initiative which is to digitize medical health records. These are things that significantly impact the efficiency with which health insurance is driven, and largely possible because of this platform that has been created by by Ayushman Bharat.
Right.
There are many challenges in this also, because the scheme not all hospitals are keen to take on this facility, because the amounts they get from the government are very small. So that's the normal push and pull, I think, which will sort itself out over time.
Okay. So let's move to the next part, which is talking about Kapil as an entrepreneur, as a startup entrepreneur.
Yes.
My first question to you is, and I've asked this to all people who come on my show who are startup entrepreneurs, is it better to have a co-founder or go solo?
I think it's much better to have a co-founder, because I was reading somewhere where it says that in any work you do or business you build, you need to have heart, mind, and will. There were sort of 3 dimensions that they said. And I think it's very difficult for one person to be all 3 at all times. Sometimes you may be strong on the heart dimension, sometimes on the will or the perseverance dimension. And when there are 2 people, it's sort of who are complementary, I think those 3 dimensions get captured very well. Also, what I find, Ashutosh, is that as we build the business, you think when you start a business that as you keep building it, it's going to become easier and easier because things will get set. That's what I thought when I finished my IIT. And unfortunately, it's not like that. Things become difficult and difficult and difficult. And so you need more and more and more people as you go along.
Thank you. And my next question to you is that what are some of the basic mistakes a lot of startup entrepreneurs make?
I feel that, because of the way we read the newspapers and we see these few businesses that suddenly shoot up, like they start something and then within a year or 2 years, they're $1 billion valuation. It sets the wrong expectations, and so if you take 10 years to build a business, you don't feel good about it because somebody else has done it in like 15 months or 18 months, and the growth rates are 500 and 1000%, and you're plodding around at a 70%. So I think entrepreneurs have to have a very reasonable view on what it will take to build a business, and that is not a 2-3 year dimension. They have to prepare for a decade, maybe longer. I think that is the most important thing.
Okay. At what stage should an entrepreneur start thinking of scaling up? Because when I speak to private equity people, the only thing they want to talk about is pan-India. And I've often told people, I said, if you were to just stay in Delhi and Gurgaon or the NCR, you've got 23, 24 million people. So at what stage should a startup start to scale up?
I feel one should scale up when you understand your economics very well, and that normally takes at least 2 years. So if you set up a branch, let's say I'm just talking of a more traditional thing, you set up a branch or you make an investment in a certain sort of technology, it takes a while for that to actually begin to recover costs on a direct cost basis, and you don't know how it's going to pan out till it's panned out. So I feel that when there are pressures to scale up, it's one, as an entrepreneur, we should push back and scale up only once we are sure that the scale up will actually yield results. Otherwise, you'll sort of 1.5 years down the line, you'll be regretting it because you'll say that, oh, I sort of spent this money which went waste. And money is a scarce commodity, or whatever anybody may say. So I think you should take a little time. But when you're sure of the economics, then you should really pull out the stops.
And when you were scaling up Secure Now nationally, what were some of your challenges?
For us, the national scale up was a little easier because it's a highly technology driven platform. And so once we've created a platform, we don't have to build infrastructure in every place that we go to. And in fact, while we started operations in Delhi initially, we suddenly found that we had customers in about 150 different locations who had on their own come to our platform and bought from us. So for us, I dare say that we were national before we sort of thought we wanted to be national. And the rest of it just followed through.
That's good. Yeah. So one more question related to insurance, then I've got some personal questions for you. Kapil, this is the age of the millennials and the Gen Zs.
Yes.
How are these young group of people who've got such a clear mind of their own, how are they reacting to insurance as a segment?
Yeah, of course. So all the millennials who come to us don't come to us for insurance for themselves, because they sort of feel they're invincible and they don't mind taking the risk. Where they come to us is because they're concerned about the parents. And so they'll come and say, I want a health insurance for my parent and I want a life insurance. So I actually don't think the millennials are a market for themselves, but for whom they represent. But I also see it as a very positive sign because I see a care and concern for people around them, which goes opposite to, because all of us now, you spoke of vintage, there's a tendency for us to think that we were like this and these guys are like that. And that's not really the case, because I think they are very concerned. They're far more concerned about their parents than I may have been about my family, my parents. So that's the market which is there, and I think rather than focusing on insurance for the millennials, if we focus on who they want to buy insurance for, that is a big opportunity.
So I've got time for a few personal questions with you now.
Lovely.
My first question is, where does Kapil draw his inspiration from?
Well, obviously, we have a very close-knit family. I don't think you can be an entrepreneur unless you have the family's complete backing because of the ups and downs. I also have some people I look up to. When I was in IIT, one of my professors was Dr. Kiran Seth, who founded Spick McCain. And it's a purely volunteer-based organization, which is now fairly sizable. And I look at him and the way he sort of built that organization up on a volunteer basis without any money, reached a certain scale, met the challenges of a startup in a sense. And he's 70 plus now. And so when I look at that and I say that, look, they're so inspiring, some of what people like him are doing. So I find inspiration like that in so many different places. There are people I know, like the people I've told you, are people I know. There are people I don't know whom I've read about, whom I just find fascinating.
Yes. So my next question is that what would be 3 adjectives that define Kapil?
That's a little difficult to answer, and I'll answer it, but I'll tell you why. Because it's one of the things I struggled with. Like, supposing as a strength, let's say I'm using the sort of corporate jargon, I would to say that I'm a humble person. Uh-huh. The very fact that I say I'm humble means I'm not humble. Or if I say I have high integrity, right. It's not high integrity; it's a normal integrity. You sort of accept. So but if I were to say something, I think I love connecting with people. I relate with people. I empathize with them. I don't know if these are adjectives, but I would say that is, in a sense, what I do well.
Terrific. So my next question to you is that if you were a role model to millions of children who closely followed your life choices, yes, what would be the one thing you would change in yourself?
That is such a pertinent question, because I have to think about that with my own kids. My daughter's in first year college and my son's in school. And I think about that a lot. And I think what I would like to do is be far bolder in making career choices than I have been. So, I have worked in traditional companies for long periods, which I loved, but there were so many other things I could have done on my own. What I did now in terms of entrepreneurship, I could have done earlier. I could have been less concerned about how the world perceives me as a success or not a success. And I wish that these kids think like that. They don't get they're driven by what they want to do rather than what the external world or people around them view them as. I think that would be the one thing I change in myself. It's taken a long while for me.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So my next question is that what is the most exciting and challenging aspect of your work?
I love the fact that everything is in my control, or well, to a large extent. Not everything is not in my control, but like if I want to do some initiative, I can do it. If I find there's a good person willing to get into the business, I can do it. So the degrees of freedom that I have are very good. If I want to just take some time off and read a book, I have that ability. I may not exercise it often enough, but that freedom, I think, is what I love most about my work.
So I have time for two more questions for you.
Fantastic.
One question is that if you could gain one ability or quality that you admire in someone else, what would that be?
I think there are two sort of aspects to that. One is what I already referred to, which is that I would like to be much less driven by external appreciation and much more driven by internal. And I think the second thing is that I should be a little bit more hard-nosed in sort of with people who work with me and people whom I know. If they're not right for what they're doing and they're better off elsewhere, then I should take those decisions a lot faster. If those are some of the things that I can change, I think I'll be a better entrepreneur.
Terrific. So my last question to you, and this would automatically relate to the situation we are all in today, which is the pandemic. Given the current situation, how are you rethinking your life in a new world order?
Well, the priorities have all changed. We all know conceptually that health, well-being, all of that is much more has always been the most important, but that's a theoretical understanding. Now, I think for the first time, that's become very real, and all of us are seeing people close to us, family members, friends, suffering from COVID.
Yeah.
And you realize this thing is real. It's going to last for a long time. Businesses are in bad shape. The world is not the way it used to be, and I think at least for me, it's become important that I spend a lot of time with the family, take care of the health, not fluster or worry about things that are not so important. I think there's a very substantial change taking place in all of us in the way we are wired internally. I think that's definitely happening to me.
Kapil, thank you very much. It's been such a pleasure speaking to you. I wish Secure Now lots of success. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Ashutosh. Thanks for time.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.